The growing up for me, you know, in the rear view, things are always a lot clearer, a lot sharper. But I had an awesome childhood. I really did. You can kind of break it up into two or three different kind of areas, I guess, or I'm not Taylor Swift, but I had my eras, I guess, when I was a kid. From the time I was born till fifth grade, we lived in the same kind of small town in southern Illinois, and my folks both grew up in that area. So I had my parents, I had my grandparents, had cousins, aunts and uncles all around. So it seemed like as a kid growing up, I knew everybody. And, it was back in the old days where you could leave the house in the morning, come back at night, and just be out on your own as a kid. I remember walking probably after school from school to my grandmother's house like it was a mile, and me and three or four kids would walk home from school every day, and we weren't worried about anything other than um, just what happened at school that day, or talking or fussing with each other, doing what kids do. So it was pretty idyllic. You could go home, put your books down, run outside and play until it got dark, and not worry about being outside or anything like that. So it was really cool. Loved riding my bike everywhere or around town. That was really cool. So that was fun. My parents worked both of them worked a lot. My mom was actually going to nursing school when I was in elementary school. So my dad was working, she was at school working, doing a lot of stuff. So stayed with my grandparents a lot, um, kind of day to day, but folks were home at night. It sounds kind of like a Leave It to Beaver episode or something, from the old reruns, but it was cool. It was fun. All families have drama and stuff like that in them, but it wasn't the centerpiece. It wasn't the focus. So that was like through fifth grade. And oh, by the way, I have a brother he is about 4.5 years younger than me. So a little bit of a gap there, but he was there too. And just like a typical younger brother, if he saw me doing it, he thought he could do it too. So he was out running the streets with me or his friends a lot too. So that was pretty cool. Just being able to do that as kids, building that confidence and being able to be out and about. And then in fifth grade, my dad worked for Exxon. And so we started from fifth grade through ninth grade, we started moving around quite a bit with work. And I think I counted it up the other day in 5 years, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth. In those years, I went to 7 different schools. So we would, generally we would start at one and finish the year, but there were a couple of times where in the middle of the year we moved. And I think the reason I mentioned that is it wasn't traumatic. It wasn't, as a kid, you don't always want to do it. You want to get somewhere and get settled, but it was always new. Okay, here's a new adventure coming up. Here's someplace new we're going to go, something we're going to do. And I wasn't, you know, how do I put this? I wasn't the most outgoing, a little bit shy. I was, not the most physically fit, not the most attractive kid or whatever. But it was one of those where you would make friends in a new school, which would take a little while, and then boom, at the end of the year, you're moving, or so it made it kind of tough. You were learning to start relationships and then see them end. And back then, there was no internet, no cell phones, so right, I will guarantee you back then, kids in junior high did not write letters. So you could write a letter to somebody, you're not going to get a reply. You wasted a 6 cent stamp or whatever it was back then. So I mean, you kind of thought, well, I'm not coming back here anymore. These people aren't coming to see me. So put that behind you and then go on to the next one. Just kind of rinse and repeat, start making friends and stuff again. And probably, I could probably blame that on why that may be the reason that we don't keep up is that it's not that I don't value relationships. It's that it's like, well, here we go. We're moving on. We've got our own stuff going, got to reestablish and things like that. So it's not an excuse. It's just probably why those things happen. But then in ninth grade, we landed in Midland, Texas. And that was where I basically finished out junior high and high school in there. So we put down roots and that was pretty cool. It was bigger city, but a lot going on, still had a small town feel. We lived in a great neighborhood. I still connect with people that were in that neighborhood today. And actually met a guy the other day who had just moved from Midland. He's quite a bit younger than me. And I asked him, oh, what part of town did you live in? And he told me the street. And I said, oh, yeah, I live like 3 blocks from there. And I named all the streets and how you get to his house. And he was like, wow, you really did live there. And I was telling him who the friends were that I knew in the neighborhood and stuff like that on the streets he lived on. So probably freaked him out, but that was kind of funny going, oh, yeah, I know exactly where that is. So that was kind of, I guess, that next area of stability, roots, and really being able to connect with people and build those relationships and things like that. And that's where, growing up in West Texas, there's football and spring football. So that's pretty much all year round is what you're doing. So I played football out there, connected with the athletes and a lot of people that way. And that kind of really sunk the hooks in me on sports and having that as something that was a big interest. I always kind of liked sports and liked a lot of different ones, but in that aspect, I really had a chance to participate and be involved in it more. So that was kind of childhood and growing up.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something real quick. So what do you think? Because I remember my childhood too, and my childhood was pretty similar as far as like I remember we could walk places, we could go places. We didn't really care about too much of, safety issues for the most. We just did whatever. We rode four-wheelers everywhere we wanted, whatever, right? How much of
Mm-hmm.
that do you think is maybe a different environment versus like the internet era? Do you think some of it's just because we are so tuned now to all the negative stuff that comes that is out there that makes us more hesitant to let kids go out there? Or do you think it really is just not as safe as it used to be?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think as a society, we bought into the fear,
Mhm.
um, but I think part of it's the internet and the 24-hour news cycle, and that good news doesn't sell. So if there were probably kids being kidnapped and disappearing and stuff like that forever,
Mhm.
but when we started finding out about it and knowing about it and becoming more aware, people really freaked out. And I think we have some things that can probably help us. Giving your kid a cell phone, a flip phone, or having something where you can locate them, find them, and being cautious without being absolute about it. Like, no, you can't go anywhere without me. You can't go. You can't do. It's like, well, let me go with you to this, or let's walk through this. How do we do this? So being more, I think, as parents, you have to be more involved. And there's a line between being involved and being a helicopter parent. And I think if we're a little more involved and aware, um, it's, I think some of that can happen again. Kids need to be able to play. You know, they don't need 28 parents around watching them do everything, and you know, supervising every move, or you can't do this, you can't do that, or you might get hurt. I can't tell you how many times I fell off the merry-go-round at the playground, or the metal slide in the middle of the summer was really hot and I
Yeah,
blistered the back of my leg, or something like that. I mean, you're going to get bumps and bruises, and that's knowledge. If kids don't have that, if they can't get out of the house, if the internet's the only thing they know, or their only boundaries, or their only risk taking, I think it doesn't set them up for success later on.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think you mentioned even like doing all that stuff helps you be more confident. I think that's a big part is if we don't allow our kids sometimes, you know, to be able to step back a little bit and let our kids like, hey, like you want to walk to a friend's house? That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think about it, like there's two risks there. There's a risk of like, yes, something could happen to them in the short term, and that is possible. Or think about the long term ramifications. If we don't allow them to do things like that, we're not setting them up for success as adults, right? We're teaching them to be
Right.
afraid. We're teaching them not to be able to handle things. And yeah, at the end of the day, what as a parent, what do you prefer? Do you want your kid to be overly cautious, or do you want them to be able to be confident enough to take risks at times and to trust their own, you know, conscience and insights? And I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we were my wife and I, we were the scourge of my kids' elementary school for a while, because she was working and traveling a lot, and I had a small construction business. I was building privacy fences. We have those down here. Not everybody has them, but it's that 6 foot wooden
Yeah.
picket fence. Used to build those, and in third grade, yeah, I guess third, fourth grade for my kids. They were a year apart in school. We got them flip phones, and the reason we did that is there were restrictions that went with it, but the reason we did that was, with me working, being on job sites, and my wife maybe being out of town, I wanted to be able to connect with the kids and say, hey, I can't be there to get you, but walk home, and when you get home, text me, or text me when you're leaving school, and text me when you get home, so that we could touch base. The
Mhm.
deal was those phones were supposed to be off all day at school. Well, got a few calls that somehow that didn't happen a couple of
Yeah.
times, but you know, you take it away enough times and ground people, that message gets in there, or they become smarter about hiding it. But anyway, you know, something like that. It was, and the parents hated us around there because, well, your kid's got a phone now, my kid wants one. Well, you know, I'm not responsible for your kid and getting them home from school and back and forth. So you got to make that decision as a parent. But for us, it worked. And it was something that we decided to do so that my kids had some freedom. They weren't sitting in school all afternoon waiting for somebody to get there, or they took off home and I didn't know where they were. As long as we had that communication, I think the words I used was, I always want to be able to find you on a map. So as long as I know where you are, I'm fine. But if when when that's not the case, that's when we have a problem, when we have an issue. So it worked out for us okay. They survived not only childhood, but they survived their parenting. So they've thrived and done better from it, I guess.